Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has criticized the United Nations over its aid appeal for the country's northeast. UN officials have doubled their target for international donations to $1 billion. But Buhari says they're exaggerating the troubles just to raise money. CCTV's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
The scale of the need in northeast Nigeria has become clearer only in recent months as government forces have driven back the ISIL affiliate militant group Boko Haram. The UN and aid agencies have been reporting regularly on what they found, and on Friday they gave their latest assessment, branding northeast Nigeria the biggest humanitarian crisis in Africa. Well, they say 26 million people are affected, 8.5 million in urgent need of humanitarian aid, and the UN is calling for $1 billion for 2017 from international donors. That's clearly annoyed the president, Muhammadu Buhari. He says the UN is blowing the crisis out of proportion purely for financial gain. Buhari's statement is a rare public sign of disagreement between the UN and the government. Well, they've actually been working together in Northeast, and the UN says it's put together its latest assessment in collaboration with the government. Kelechi Emekalam, CCTV Abuja, Nigeria.
And Liling Tan joins us live in New York for more discussion on this issue. Liling, the Nigerian president is not pleased with the estimates from the UN regarding the humanitarian requirements in the country's northeast. How was the UN assessment carried out, and what is it based on?
Well, I actually just got an email response from the UN who stand by the assessment, saying that it was closely coordinated with the Nigerian government on both the federal and local level. And I just going by the report, having looked at the report, a lot of the funding, the methodology is based on estimated needs from different UN-related agencies and non-UN national non-governmental organizations or NGOs that are working together to address the humanitarian needs here. Now, there are about 50 of these agencies that gave their estimates of what they need in terms of funds to carry out their activities. Much of these activities, according to the report, are directed at addressing some of the most pressing issues there, the bulk of which is on addressing food security, food insecurity, and those needs account for the bulk of that $1 billion. And that's followed by the need to address financial needs to address lack of nutrition, health issues, to provide protection and shelter, and also address education and lack of water, sanitation, and hygiene. So a huge range, broad-ranging issues that many of these agencies are looking for financial support to address. So this report actually quite makes the case and breaks down the needs for this $1 billion required.
Now, how is the UN likely to respond to accusations that it's exaggerating the situation in Nigeria just to raise money?
Well, the UN has stood by this assessment, saying that it did involve a lot of close coordination with the government. But that said, the UN hasn't. We're still waiting for the UN to give a more precise breakdown of what exactly is required. But for the most part, the UN does. It is standing by this assessment of needs for Nigeria.
And Liling, the UN has also launched an appeal for $22.2 billion in 2017 to help over 90 million people hit by conflicts and natural disasters. How do countries in Africa stand to gain from such a kitty?
Well, most of this is directed at countries in Africa, mostly covers some of the key countries facing major, persistent, long drawn-out conflicts. Now, you talked about Burundi earlier. That's one of the countries involved in this appeal. The political crisis is deepening, and you mentioned the need for urgent support now applies to some 3 million people. But also, South Sudan is one of the key areas of concern, where about 1.2 million people, most of whom, about 80%, are women and children, have fled or are displaced, and this has been the largest refugee movement in Africa. So these are just two of some of the key conflict areas that this humanitarian appeal applies to, but it also covers Cameroon, the Central African Republic, the DRC, Chad, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Libya, Mali, and a range of other countries. So it's quite a broad appeal for African nations.
And Liling, let me just quickly draw your attention to developments in Libya. We've heard, of course, the pro-government forces saying they have seized control of Sirte. How is the liberation of Sirte being viewed by the UN?
Yes, we've heard, I've received responses from the UN mission in Libya, which says it is continuing to follow developments there. As well as the UN Secretary General, he said that he's encouraged by the progress made in the fight against terrorist and violent extremist groups. Now, this is for the most part a positive development in the fight against ISIL in Libya, but it's also a tenuous win in the sense that it does very little to address some of the key fundamental political issues that Libya continues to face. We know that the forces loyal to the government of national accord is recapturing Sirte, but this government of national accord doesn't have full support as the government of Libya. It still faces resistance from the separate Libyan parliament that refuses to fully endorse this UN-backed GNA. So a lot of questions remain about what will happen next in Libya's political process.
All right, Liling Tan joining us live from New York. Much appreciated. Thank you.